Grace and peace, everyone. This is Speaking the Truth in Love. I'm Sister April Vassell. For those of you who have been tuning in for the last few days, almost a week now, you saw the word the Lord gave me on November 30th regarding greedy prophets. Wowee. What a word, what a word, what a word. Ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom, when God gives a word, He means it, and He's not a liar. When He sends a word out, it's like a hammer that smashes rocks in pieces. It goes where it's meant to go, and it hits the target it's meant to hit. It's funny. Here in New York, we have a local civil rights activist by the name of Reverend Sharpton. He's a local hero to us. His people hail originally from the South, but he's been living here, raised here since the time he was a small child. He would always recount a story about a conversation between him and his mother when he was a young boy. Since their people hailed from the South, they were country people. They had a bit of an agrarian life. And she taught him when he was very small, if you ever throw a rock in a herd full of pigs or swine, as they may say across the pond, and you hear something squeal, the one that hollers is the one you hit. God doesn't send empty words. If somebody hollers over it, it's because they got hit. Period. I don't pick and choose God's words for him. He doesn't need me to do that. He's God. He says what he wants to say the way that he wants to say it to whomever he chooses to say it. He said what he meant about greedy prophets. He said what he meant, that he was watching over his word, and the people who claim to speak his word in his name, that nothing is hidden from his sight, and when a word comes directly from him, it doesn't fall to the ground. I will leave the link for that word on greedy prophets here. Exactly 24 hours after the Lord had me release that word, there was a response. An evil and treacherous one. That I didn't expect. It came from a direction from someone that should have been on the Lord's side. Sadly, the word on greedy prophets pulled the cloak off, or dare should I say, the wig off, and revealed an enemy in plain sight that I was not aware of. No clue. When God calls somebody a Balaam, it's not to be taken lightly. When God exposes Balaams, it's not to be taken lightly. The reason why God does that is because Balaam's put his people under threat. He puts their lives in jeopardy, and if not rapidly addressed, can potentially wipe out the plans and destinies that God put in place for his people. He does not trifle with Balaams. He removes them. If you are aware of what has transpired over the last week, it's been a very painful one. But that which was meant for evil, God has indeed turned to good. He gave me an example of himself. When the Lord was put on the cross to be crucified, hell thought they had him where they wanted him. It was the ultimate coup de grace. It's the best of all possible outcomes. Shut him down. They thought they won. What they didn't realize is, in trying to cut him off, they freed him. They liberated him. They gave him the ability to be the blessing that he needed to be to the entire family of mankind. Christ is no longer here in the flesh, but his spirit interacts, moves, and is amongst us each and every day. Hell has nothing that they can do to him ever again. They mocked him. They spat on him. They humiliated him. They tried to grind him down to less than dust. They shamed him. They threw his words back in his face. They checked his mouth, took the words out of it, and tried to use them as weapons against him. And yet his words still stand to this day. His enemies do not. They are nowhere to be found. They are less than dust under his feet. They've been remanded to the pit, and there they sit this day, waiting for the eternal judgment of the one that they mocked while he was briefly here on earth. Ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom, it is not a light thing when you mock a prophet of God. They don't pick themselves. God picks them. They don't prep themselves. God preps them. They don't run here and there to make themselves known. God tells them, this is where I want you to go. Now go. This is what I want you to say. Now speak. Or in some cases, he'll just tell them to sit down and be quiet and wait until further instructions are given. On December 1st, an individual who claimed to be a mouthpiece for God launched a personal attack against me, a vicious one. Now, you would say, if this person doesn't know you, they never met you, how would they have all this information about you? That's the key point. This person Daphne Avila of Daphne Avila Ministries is not to be trusted. When I sat down with the Lord over the last few days, He made it perfectly clear this was the open door that I had. I had no ill will or animosity towards this person. I had admired her greatly. And indeed, I had been a subscriber to her ministry for the past 3 years, no more than 3 years. For a time, the light of God was on her. She did indeed give wisdom to the women of God that followed her. She did indeed represent the king and the kingdom. Somewhere along the line, I don't know where, probably within the last year or so, 2 years, 3 years, I would say, there's been slow changes in the individual. She has indeed attempted to hinder, to harm, and indeed attempt to destroy the work of God in my life. The words that she went and repeated ever so craftily were indeed spoken by me, but in the privacy of my own bedroom, in my own home. This person is guilty. Well, this person has committed spiritual espionage. She is indeed a spy in the kingdom community and is no longer to be trusted. If you have any questions, feel free to review, if she hasn't taken it down already, the words she released on December 1st, 2021, entitled, "I Will Prove Your Accusers Wrong." The Lord has heard the words that you spoke in that particular broadcast, and He checked your mouth, and He has used your very words as a transcript against you. Ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom, when somebody commits an act of spiritual espionage or treachery against you, you do have legal redress in the court of heaven. You have every right in order to file a complaint to the Most High God, King and ruler of this universe, yourself. When somebody takes a spiritual cheap shot at you and takes words from your own mouth in your own private environment, which they were not invited into, and takes your words from your heart that you had on a bad day or several bad days to try and shame and discredit and undermine you and the work that the Lord is doing in your life, because the warfare is heavy and you're tired, and they essentially spiritually hot mic'd your room, because that's what spiritual espionage is. God gives certain individuals in His kingdom the ability to see people in the spirit from their own locations. They could be in one country, but He can allow you to see another person in another country. He gives His people, certain individuals, the ability to hear. Like in Elisha's case, there was a king that was set up against Israel, and Elisha was given the ability to hear the king's plans and to tell the people of Israel, don't go this way, don't go that way. So much so that it frustrated the enemies of Israel and said, who is it that's the spy in here? To which it was replied, nobody, your highness, but Elisha hears the words you speak in your bedroom. When God gives certain individuals the gift of seeing in the spirit or hearing in the spirit other people, those gifts were given because He trusted you to gather intelligence on His enemies, not your own. Those gifts and abilities that He gave you, spiritual intelligence gifts, were to keep an eye and an ear on Satan and his kingdom, not those that threaten your quote-unquote position in God's kingdom. That was an act of treachery against the cross and the crown. Acts of spiritual espionage are not taken lightly. And when somebody has breached spiritual protocol, spiritual etiquette, spiritual respect for another servant of God, that is not to be taken lightly. That is being a double agent against the kingdom and the king. Because when you undermine the ability of one of His servants to move forward in the work that He has prepared, man or woman, makes no difference, you have given the enemy positioning against the kingdom of God itself. It is not to be taken lightly. The Lord had me look up the word espionage. And the definition of espionage is the act of obtaining secret or confidential information from non-disclosed sources or divulging of the same without the permission of the holder of the information. Whatever it was this person thought they were trying to get from me, or they thought I had, that they wanted, or they thought they could put a stop to in the spiritual realm, whether it was gleaned from spiritual gifts that God gave them, or divination that they practice from the dark side, makes no difference. You have the right to go to God directly and ask that this person's treachery be put to a stop. So what I did is I went to the Lord and filed my complaint in the court of heaven. I've been taking cheap shots. It's been brutal this year. Absolutely brutal. Brutal. And indeed, over the last 3 to 5 years, it's been hell. Whatever assignment the Lord has for me, which He has not made completely crystal clear to me yet, He's given me bits and pieces, but the whole picture hasn't come together yet. Other people in the spirit see. And they seem to have ganged up, just like ganging up on a playground, 3 o'clock. Put me in the middle of a circle, and it's been the beatdown of a lifetime. No joke. But the Lord has come to my defense, and the only reason you see me alive sitting in this chair this day is because when my enemies rose up against me to try and kill me, not just in the spirit, but I mean physically kill me, God said no. He is the only reason I am alive this day. Ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom, I don't play with God. He's brought me through way too much. I don't play jokes with Him. I'm careful about how I treat Him. And He's careful about how others treat me. He may allow you to get away with some stuff for a while. But take my life from me before He's ready? Never. That's not going to happen. Never. His word stands. His plans stand. And His judgments stand. So when I filed my complaint in the court of heaven for the act of spiritual espionage that was committed against me, the decision came down in my favor this day. Today is December 7th, 2021. For those of you who are American, you know that December 7th has a very significant position in American history. It was 80 years ago today that another act of treachery was committed against this country, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The similarities between what happened to me on December 1st and what took place on December 7th The people who were in their barracks, in their ships, were basically minding their business. It was early Sunday morning. They had a quiet routine. It wasn't very busy. They never saw the attack coming. They were completely caught off guard. They were rained down upon in violence. And by the time the enemy left, there were only a handful of people that were still alive. The insult, the personal attack that I took on December 1st of this year was indeed, in the spiritual, an attack that I did not see coming. Spiritual blitzkrieg. Insult after insult, accusation after accusation, personal remark after personal remark. It was brutal. It was painful. It hurt a lot. But what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. It exposed one enemy to the open air. It exposed vulnerabilities within the way one is conducting online platforms. Why should the Lord trust another individual with a spiritual platform or encourage them to become subscribers to their ministries if it will bring more damage to their spirit and soul than if they just remained an unbeliever and gone on about their business? This is why God is calling his so-called prophets out on the carpet. It's because of things like this. This was not friendly fire. There was nothing friendly about it. Friendly fire implies that something was done accidentally. This was deliberate. So I asked and got a decision from the court of heaven this day. And this I say directly to you, Daphne Avila. In the name of the Most High God who made me, his Son Christ who saved me, and the Spirit of the living God that keeps breath in my lungs this day. You have been found guilty of the crime of spiritual espionage, being an enemy and using the gifts and callings and abilities that God permitted you to have, like the Balaam that you are, and using them as weapons against his people. I am not the first person that you have done this to, but I will be the last. The sentence that has been handed down to you from the high court of heaven is this: a spiritual injunction has now been put in place against you. God never takes away giftings and callings and trainings that he gives a person, but he does void their license to use them when they've been found to be unfaithful with them. Your permission to speak on his behalf has been removed. Your credibility, null and void. Your ability to conduct kingdom work, vacated. Removed. Nullified. Take your page down. Go back to being a private citizen, since clothes and hair and nails are all that you're concerned about. Go back to that. Since money is your God, you can have your fill of it. Be gone. Leave kingdom work to kingdom people. To those of you who don't know what an injunction is, I'll read the definition of it. An injunction is a judicial order that restrains a person from beginning or continuing an action, threatening or invading the legal right of another, or that compels a person to carry out a certain act, meaning to make restitution to a person who has been injured. I call on the Most High God in order to bring restitution, not just to me personally, but to the office of prophet, to those he genuinely gifted in the prophetic, who have taken a very miserable beating in this season for having done precisely what he told us to do. The Lord has already vindicated me. If you check the word on greedy prophets, the Lord made mention of his servant Phinehas, who went and took on Balaam and killed him. On December 5th, 2021, the Lord did indeed send his servant Phinehas, that is his spiritual name, to take on the spirit of Balaam and publicly slay it with his mouth, to take on and take down the spirit of Balaam. And to the Lord's servant Phinehas, please check the book of Numbers. I'm not sure if it's in 22 or 24. I have to go back through it. Forgive me. But there's a direct mention of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, because he faithfully fulfilled the Lord's heart regarding his enemies. The Lord made an everlasting covenant with him and his house. As he has done for Phinehas in the natural, so you, Phinehas in the spiritual, he has granted this particular blessing to you. Before I wrap this up, the Lord wanted me to point out one more thing. He gives examples of greed in the animal kingdom for us in order to see and beware of. The first is the pig. When somebody wants to insult you, if your appetite is too much, you can't restrain or control it, they call somebody a greedy pig. The other animal that has that label is the dog. Greedy dogs. They don't know when to stop. So before I call it a day, I thought I'd share a little bit of poetry with you. And this is Avila. This is for you. Clothes of red, wig of gold, very haughty, very bold, bleeding from the inner soul. Worthy foe, yes indeed, overflowing with leprous greed, to whom one was sent to intercede. You're lacking grace in the inner soul. Afflicted with pride, like Vashti too. Will the story end the same for you? You're a gainsayer in the inner soul. A beautiful box with spiders within. A serpent with a perfect grin. A venomous asp loaded with sin. Masquerading in the inner soul. Astral projection caused the rift with your God, who was your real gift. Glorified necromancer is what you are, and your craftiness has brought you far. In heaven's balances, tried and weighed, with judgment you will be paid. The sentence will not be stayed, for you've taught rebellion in the inner soul. May the souls you beguiled be mercifully spared, and their trust in God be repaired, with Christ's restoration in the inner soul. I hope you liked that. One final thing. I know this is kind of drawing out, but one final thing. Exactly 1/2 hour after I heard those derogatory comments from her last broadcast, I kid you not, folks, I walked into a store, minding my own business. Hadn't been in there for a very long time, just to kind of look around. Went up to the second floor, took an escalator up, something I don't normally do because I don't really feel the need to peek around on their second floor to shop. And what was stacked high right next to the register, where I could see it, was this. check the mouth on this one. This is Speaking the Truth in Love. I'm Sister April Vassell. And remember, watch your mouth, because the Lord is watching it and listening to you. God bless you.